Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Norwegian Commercial Club, our January meeting, January 28th, 2021, the first meeting of the year. And I'll turn the podium over to our president, Debbie Larson.
Welcome, everyone. As Eric said, this is the first meeting of the new year of Norwegian Commercial Club. And I am Debbie Larson, president of NCC. Today is January 28th, and it's great to be back together again virtually after our holiday break. Today we heard from the governor that some restrictions are changed as of February 1st, but until further notice, we will continue to follow the state guidelines and meet virtually for our NCC meetings. We will let you know any updates, if there are any updates for our meetings. So until then, to be together, you can watch the virtual meetings anytime, now, live, or anytime on our NCC YouTube channel. So since we all really miss being together, we're looking to create a virtual social hour. And so we are going to let you know more about that as it comes up. We hope to have that in February, and if it goes smoothly, we'll do it again before the end of the NCC season. So stay tuned. So now we will observe a moment of silence for those members who have passed away since our last meeting. Tonight, we remember the patriarch of Dakota Creek Shipyard, Dick Nelson. Longtime Fisheries Committee member Stan Hendricks. And longtime LIBA, that's a Lake Erickson Building Association, board member Asbjorn Sorensen. Thank you. So I have a couple of announcements. We are continuing important activities like our scholarship program. We wanted to make sure you know that. In spite of our not being able to meet, we are continuing to work on our scholarship funding. We have funding to give, and you will be hearing from our scholarship committee over the next few weeks to let you know how we can get the word out to young people that are interested in getting the education that they want. We want to be able to continue to support that. And thank you to many who have chosen to contribute to that. We have a button, and Corey will tell you more about that. So I'm going to now turn it over to Corey Nelson, and then I'll catch you back up. And he'll talk about financial, scholarship, membership, things like that. Welcome,
Thank you.
Corey.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank all of the dedicated members out there who've paid their dues. It's those membership dues that are going to sustain the club, not just this year, but in years ahead too. So we've got just a great membership, and they've really come through for us. So thank you very much. And like Debbie said, the great thing is we've got scholarships this year. So we're not going to slow down on that. And I encourage everybody to reach out to anyone you know who might need it. I think there might be some other organizations out there that might have to cut back on some of that stuff. So hopefully this year ours will really come in handy to a lot of people. So I'm really hoping for that too. And then like Debbie said, we've got some enhancements on our website. I encourage everybody to check it out. There's new online buttons. You can pay your dues if you do still owe them. Donations as well are also highly appreciated. So the website's all been revamped. Dean Monis has done a lot of work on that. I want to just give a special thanks to him. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back over to Debbie.
Thank you, Corey. Another thing that I want to be sure you know is that the May 17th committee has been meeting, and we will not be able to have the normal parade, but we are really looking at putting together a kind of parade. We want to be able to celebrate again this year. So we are going to let you know more, because we don't know yet for sure. We have ideas, but we are putting them together and reaching out to get permission on certain things. And we're gonna let you know about that. So it may be that you watch some of it virtually and that you may be able to drive perhaps, but we are going to let you know more. And I wanna thank the committee for working on that, and we'll let you know more about that. So now, just to make sure you know that our money, our prize money for membership, our drawing is one of those things that you have to be present to win. So make sure you stay on here and listen to the whole program tonight, because if your name is drawn, we're gonna draw 3 names, and whoever calls first wins the money. Nobody called last time, so there's now $40 for whoever wins the drawing. And that number you will call is 425-802-0679. So we'll come back on and talk about that after the speaker. And right now I'm going to turn it back over to Eric Peel, who's going to introduce our speaker of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, President Debbie. That's fantastic. And it's my great pleasure to introduce this evening Viggo Forde, our Consul General from Norway for Washington and Idaho. And Viggo is here with us this evening to give us an update on all things about Norway. And we usually have an update from Viggo at the end of each year, but unfortunately last year due to COVID, that meeting was canceled. So we're thrilled to have you here, Viggo, with us this evening. And I'll turn the podium over to you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Debbie and Corey as well. Hoping everybody can hear me okay. And I'm going to take a moment here and do some screen sharing without breaking something, hopefully. So if you can just validate that my screen has been shared, Eric, that would be great.
Yes, you're looking good, Viggo. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you for letting me be here. Again, it's always a pleasure. Gosh, it's hard to believe we've been in this scenario for about a year now, and here we are, right? And I'm very appreciative of the commercial club and the other organizations and how much effort you put into bringing the community together. It's not easy. I'm sure that everybody is tired of Zoom and Teams and WebEx calls from morning to night and into the night. That being said, the fact that we can do this is wonderful. So I'm very, very appreciative of the time that you take and the energy that the board puts into doing these. It's important, keeps the community connected. A big part of my role, of course, is to be involved in the community, and you know, I have some freedom to talk about a set of different things here during this presentation. So today, I thought I would give you just a general update on some things that in my role as consul, feel are mandatory to share with you. I'll throw in some facts and data about Norway just to keep you updated on how things are moving and shaking over there. It's been about 2 years now since we did that, so it's always good to look at some of the statistics from Statistisk Sentralbyrå and other places. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing locally as well at the consulate, so that you have a little bit of a sense of a connection there. However, before I do that, I'm going to cross your fingers. This should work well. But I want to run a little marketing material here, a little Norway video. So I think this should work if everything goes the way it's supposed to.
Days without sunlight, and nights without darkness, stretching far beyond the Arctic Circle. Norway is powered by nature, and so are we. with a society that strongly believes in equality, together with free healthcare and education, everyone has the opportunity to pursue their dreams, making us the happiest people in the world. Our coastline, rivers, and fjords form the backbone of our main industries. That's why we are pioneers within marine technology, aquaculture, and energy. And all our electricity comes from clean hydropower. The future of our planet is uncertain, but we choose to be optimistic. We believe that only together we can succeed. Adapting new technology, we must strive to design greener, better, and smarter. By exploring the exceptional, we are pushing for a new standard. Days without sunlight, and nights with...
Okay, hopefully that came through okay for everybody. One of the wonderful things in my role is that I get to interact with a lot of different people, and one of those organizations is Innovation Norway. They have access to all sorts of interesting marketing material and so on. So I will admit I borrow and steal a little bit from Innovation Norway, but it's also an important part of my role to be a bit of a voice for Innovation Norway and other organizations as well from Norway here locally, and a little bit beyond that as well. Now, it's worth noting that in January, just not even 10 days ago, the King and the Queen celebrated their 30th anniversary as monarchs of Norway. It's hard to look back and realize how fast time has gone since King Olav passed away back in the 90s, and here we are. I think it's a wonderful image of the King and the Queen. They are such phenomenal ambassadors for our country, and they always do such a good job of representing what Norway stands for. And if you haven't had a chance to go out and listen to the King's speech on New Year's Eve, I highly encourage you to do that. There's always a lot of wisdom there, and it always brings me inspiration when I listen to what he has to share. Now, of course, there's a hierarchy here. His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, he is, I think he's 47 years old now, so he's aging as well. And of course, his daughter, Princess Ingrid Alexandra, she is formally going to be the first queen at some point in the future in modern Norway. And that is obviously a monumentous change for Norway in terms of the, it's not the firstborn son anymore, it is now the firstborn. And that is a wonderful thing. Talks a lot about how important equality is in Norway. So it's really nice to see that change that will be taking place in the future. The government in Norway has not changed for about a year. I will say that Erna Solberg's government has probably gone through some ups and downs since she became prime minister in 2013. And right now, as you can see on the slide, the Conservative Party and the Progress Party is part of the government, and then was also extended to the Liberal Party, and then again, the Christian Democratic Party. However, a little while ago, about a year ago, the Progress Party actually resigned from the government. So it's a bit more tricky. You know, these coalition governments are challenging, but I will say that the current prime minister, she has been masterful at navigating the complexity of a multi-party government for almost 10 years now, and it's admirable. And it's not an easy job for sure, so I have a lot of respect for how she has navigated that and really kept the country on a great course. Now, you also very likely know that we have a new ambassador to the United States. Anniken Krutnes is the new ambassador. She started, gosh, I think it was back in July of last year. And she comes with a lot of experience and a lot of insight to this particular role. Of course, we are going to miss Forde and all the great contributions that he made. He was a big fan of Seattle, and I can tell you that I am lobbying very hard to ensure that as soon as the travel schedule opens up again, that we can get the ambassador to come visit us here locally. I have been informed, and I understand this with the administration changes, that there's a big focus right now on, if you will, protecting the relationship between Norway and the United States with the new administration. So her time and her energy for quite some time is going to be focused on making sure that the politicians visiting from Norway and others that need to interact with the Biden administration have that access. It's important, I think, to share a little bit around what are some of the priorities that the Norwegian representation in the United States talk about. And this has continued for some time now, and I'll walk through these very, very quickly just so we have a sense of it, and it carries forward even to us locally with some of the relationships that have been established here. So energy and marine resources, that is a big deal for Norwegians, as you know, and Norway is growing rapidly in terms of impact and influence in these technologies, which has been witnessed here locally as well with the memorandum of understanding between the state of Washington and Innovation Norway that focuses on blue technologies and sustainable energies. Peace, stability, and security. That's another area that has always been core to the Norwegian value system. And Norway has been a voice of reason in many areas ever since the creation of the United Nations. I'll mention this later too, but Norway is now a member of the Security Council, was elected in starting this year. Climate change and the environment is another area that is vitally important to the Norwegians and to the Norwegian government, and the voice that Norway puts on the table globally in this area, I think is really noteworthy and worth paying attention to. Norway has always been involved in development policies and humanitarian efforts. It's always been a strong contributor there on a global basis for those countries and regions that are more in need than others. The High North refers to Norway's strategic position in the Arctic. Norway sits so far north, of course, and it's an interesting environment that far north strategically, militarily, and environmentally, and in many other ways. And that means that Norway always has a seat at the table when it comes to talking about the High North. Arts and culture is an area where Norway is very diverse, lots of different arts and cultural sectors that are both modern and deeply historical. So if you listen to some of the modern Norwegian music, for example, music that does quite well outside of Norway, you can hear a lot of the traditional undertones and so on as well. So I feel the Norwegians have done a great job of, in an example like that, to carry that history forward as well. And of course, the Norwegian society and how the Nordic model and the focus on welfare, gender equality, and economic stability really is a model for the world. And Norway has an ability and is very active in talking about the Nordic model along with our Nordic compatriots as well. So these are all areas that the Norwegian Foreign Mission communicates about and talks about and engages with the United States government and beyond to communicate around. Now, locally, obviously quite different than the things that happen at the national level. So hierarchically, the Royal Consulate, General Consulate in San Francisco oversees our region. So the honorary consuls, we technically report into the General Consulate in San Francisco, but we are actually one of the most active one in the whole country, and it's really not a surprise, if you will. So, I'm sharing a little bit of the statistics here so you get a sense of the kinds of things that people come and talk to me about. And I don't think there's any surprise that people come and talk about citizenship, particularly with the new citizenship law that was implemented about exactly a year ago. So between that, questions around citizenship, questions about passports or getting passports, which we can do for children under 12 locally, as well as a number of official acts that have to do with everything from inheritance to real estate and so on. that's really the driver of the things that that I do here locally. And one of the things that has surprised me the most in my short tenure in the last couple of years is that there are so many more Norwegians here locally than what we actually see at our events, such as Commercial Club or Chamber of Commerce or any other events. So part of my job here is to be an advocate for these organizations. I always make sure that I talk about what you do and the value that you bring to the community. So I see myself as a bit of an ambassador for all of you and talking about the importance of staying connected to these organizations. In addition to sort of the operational duties that I have, there's a fair amount of interactions with local government, either through the Norwegian channels where they need connections locally, or through Innovation Norway. Innovation Norway is very active in our region in general. And again, I will refer to the memorandum of understanding that was signed almost 2 years ago now at the Innovation Summit in Ballard at the museum. And there is certainly some progress being made there. For example, there's the ferry, the hybrid ferry that is being built at the shipyard down in Seattle, where Norwegian technology is a core element of that. There's also some conversations around blue technology in general that is being discussed. But these things move a little slow, and COVID certainly has put a damper on the ability for organizations to, for example, travel and engage and get some traction here. So I see this as a long-term play for Norway, and Innovation Norway is very supportive of our region and is very interested in growing relationships here. So that's an important part of what I also facilitate. Also other businesses. So right now, for example, I'm engaged in helping Viggo, which is a porcelain manufacturer in Norway that is interested in getting a footprint here locally as well. So these are just some examples of things that I do in my spare time aside from the operational things. And of course, these types of engagements with local organizations is very important as well. So I do want to make sure that you have access to the consulate and the services that we offer, and anything else I can do to help you as well as part of my duties. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just throw some statistics that may be interesting to some of you or maybe not, but let's go through it anyway. So the population in Norway, and this is statistics from 2020 for the most part, so almost 5.4 million people live in Norway. Now the GDP per capita, and one thing I don't have here is what it is the last time I shared this with you a couple of years ago, but you know, it's relatively high. Unemployment is higher in 2020, as you can expect, than what it typically has been. Consumer price index of 1.4%, and a net migration of 25,000 people. And I'll talk about what net migration is in just a second here. So immigration and net migration is really the difference between people that move into Norway and people that move out of Norway. And you can see there's been sort of a shift in the curve a little bit here. So the solid blue line talks about immigration, where you see a downward trend for quite a number of years now. Same goes for emigration. So that means people moving out of Norway. So those curves are pretty much aligned. The interesting part, though, is that the largest group of immigrants may surprise some people, but that's largely driven by, and I'll talk about this on the next slide a little bit, by labor needs. Poland is a large contributor to particularly manual labor in Norway, so construction work or any other related businesses around that, crafts work in general. Lots of Polish craftsmen come to Norway. No surprise really that Sweden is also pretty high on the list, because there's a lot of movement of labor between Norway and Sweden. The other ones are maybe not super surprising given the instability in the world that we have seen over the last few years. And Norway typically is very liberal with keeping the borders open for those that are in need. One thing that is interesting, though, is that in the last few years, the shift has really been less focused on, or I should say, fewer people that come in as refugees and more people that come in for work. And you saw that in the number about the Polish immigrant workers and so on. So more than twice as many people from Poland come in to be laborers in Norway compared to the second one in line, as you saw, the second group of immigrants, as you saw. Family immigration also continues to be pretty stable, but gone down a little bit, as you can see. Now let's talk about names. Emma and Jakob are the two most, and have been the two most popular names for some time. And as a matter of fact, I came across some statistics no later than last night, and it's exactly the same too in 2020 as well. You know, I think we have seen this in Norway in general, both in arts and culture and also in names. There's a bit of a return to what I would describe as more traditional values, including names, and you see that in these name lists that are published every year. Now, you know, an interesting little factoid for you here: only 51% of children are baptized in church, but you are obviously given a name, and to my point, those have been relatively stable. Those popular names have been relatively stable in the last few years. So how do Norwegians live? Well, about half of the population live in detached houses, and multi-dwelling buildings is like condos and apartment buildings is another one, another quarter of that, and almost another quarter in semi-detached houses, so like what we would call townhomes and so on. But what's more interesting here, the graph on the right side, is that you see that the detached houses, the primary dwelling that people live in, the size of those has gone down dramatically. So more and more people are moving into condos and apartment buildings, and more people are building a cabin. And that is an interesting shift in terms of the sizes there. So now you see that people's cabins are almost as large as people's main house in terms of the number of square feet. So this is in square meters. So 100 square meters is a little bit less than 1,000 square feet. So you can see that the average Norwegian home still is not a very large home. What about housing prices? Well, not shockingly, with the economy the way that it has been in Norway, housing prices have gone up dramatically. On average, across the whole country, has gone up more than 500% from 1992 to 2019. I'm not sure what that is locally here in the Puget Sound area, but it's probably in the same general percentage, I would imagine. Now, if you're trying to buy somewhere in Oslo, in the region right around Oslo, incredibly expensive. The big cities in general are more expensive, but the housing market continues to be very, very hot in Norway, and it seems to never stop. I have a brother who's a realtor in Bergen, and it seems like he never has a break, and it's been going up and up, as you can see reflected in these statistics here. So let's talk about how Norwegians consume information today versus, say, about 20 years ago. And this is not that long ago either, if you think about it. So in 1995, most of the sort of visual consumption of information was through television, and it was about a couple of hours a day on average that people spent looking at television. Now, if you go through 2019, internet is 50% more than what television was back then, and then you add in another 7-8 minutes of television. So things are changing. And then the voice media, that would be things like radio and podcasts and other things. So the way people consume information in Norway has become very digitized, very much focused on online experiences and so on, very similar to what we see in our country. What about entertainment? Well, more and more people are going to the opera. That's another interesting thing. So opera and theater attendance has increased dramatically in the last few years in Norway, and that's great for the arts. You see a lot more interest with young people attending live theater and live opera and ballet as well, and that is really encouraging to see for those of you that are in the arts community. Now, football, or what we call soccer, of course, is the most important spectator sport, and that is very stable and about 50 to 60% of Norwegians do attend sporting events, live sporting events, that is. So that's obviously something that is important to the community. The service sector is the dominant labor consumer. Now, you can see health and social work, given the welfare society in Norway, that is not necessarily a big surprise. And that is a real big driver of employment in the service sector for sure. And then, of course, retail, other services around retail as well, it's a big area. And you can also see that their education is actually third in terms of the number of people that are working in that category. So that's very, very high. Shopping habits, more and more online. Again, not a surprise. There is not an Amazon.com in Norway, but you can shop on Amazon.uk and have it shipped. And all other retailers, or most of the retailers, are also working obviously on an online environment. So this is a behavior shift, as you can see very clearly here for Norwegians, where today about 80% of Norwegians do shop online. And you can also see that Norway was actually a pretty early adopter. So if you go back about 10 to 12 years, almost 70% of Norwegians were regularly shopping online. So that's an interesting data point as well. So what are some of the big things that have happened in Norway lately? And you cannot grab everything here, but I grabbed a few headlines that may or may not be something that you're aware of. I think you probably all heard about the tragic landslide that took place in Norway just after the New Year's, or it might have been New Year's Eve. Obviously, a tragic event with loss of life and severely impacted the community in big ways. For those of you that are Snohomish County residents, this probably brings back a bit of a memory to the also landslide that took place here about 6 or 7 years ago. Very tragic events, and this was particularly sad given that it was right in the middle of a neighborhood, as you can tell. Now, I mentioned the political parties earlier, but what you may not have noticed or been aware of is that the Agrarian Party, or Senterpartiet, as it's called in Norway, is actually, per the latest polls, the largest political party in Norway. And I don't know if that has ever been the case before. So that's a really interesting shift. And with elections coming up in 2022, if that remains, that's going to make for some interesting political shifts within the country for sure. A lot of that is driven by the Green Movement, where there's a lot of passion and energy among the young population in particular. And the Agrarian Centrist Political Party has always been very focused on preservation of environment and so on and so forth. COVID, of course, is a crisis in Norway as it is globally. The death patterns are not the same as we see in the United States. So there's statistics as of this morning was about 62,000 confirmed cases and about 557 deaths. There are some late-breaking changes here that I will talk about with respect to travel restrictions that you should be aware of if you have travel plans to Norway. Interestingly, though, the wealth fund that you are familiar with, which is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, actually earned $123 billion in profit in 2020, despite the pandemic. So they continue to do a phenomenally a good job of managing the funds. As I understand it, a lot of that was also driven by technology investments and so on. So that's a big driver as well. The other thing I mentioned earlier is that Norway is today in the Security Council. So our Canadian neighbors, they lost out to Ireland and Norway when that vote took place. And then finally, an interesting little news story that has surfaced here is that Norway is the first country in the world where electric vehicle ownership cracked 50%. And that's pretty phenomenal. About 2 years ago, I think, was when I shared this information with you. It was about 48%. Now you see 50%. And it's really interesting to see if you've been back there in the last couple of years, and the number of Teslas that drive around in Norway is pretty staggering. So they take this very seriously, and there's a high focus on electric vehicles for sure. I mentioned COVID, and there's no need to talk a lot about COVID. The crisis is everywhere, but what I did want to mention is that as of this morning, travel restrictions have been really tightened in Norway. So if you are not a Norwegian citizen and a resident of Norway, you are not going to be allowed to enter. And this is driven largely by the uncertainty that comes around the new COVID variants that are starting to spread. So the country has taken a very hard stance on this to try to stop it before it becomes a problem. I read a news story today that the Swedish border police has never really had to work at the pace and level that they are doing right now since World War II. So every border crossing, there's about 300 border crossings between Norway and Sweden. And they have not been, in my lifetime, there has never been any controls in the borders between Norway and Sweden. And now there are. So this is very impactful, obviously, because those that live in the border regions, they travel a lot back and forth. And for movement of labor as well, this has become a real challenge, particularly for the construction industry in Norway. So they're a little bit uncertain what the impacts are going to be. But for those of you that have travel plans and going to Norway, absolutely pay attention to this. And if you want some more updated information, you should reach out to myself, and I'll give you some resources that are important to stay up to date on. Innovation is big in Norway. I used this paperclip design a couple of years ago when we talked last, and that's just an early example of innovation that comes out of Norway. This is a slide that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. Again, this is marketing material, and what I say here in the title: how is Norway selling Norway outside of Norway? And this is a big part of the messaging from the organization Innovation Norway, and they sell a lot of the value that the Nordic model brings to the table. The fact that Norway and the region, the Nordic region, is politically stable, very democratic. There's a lot of trust in the official institutions. There's a lot of similarity and less differences in society. So in general, it just provides a very stable economic investment model for companies that are interested in investing in Norway, or companies that are coming from Norway and trying to get established over here. So there's an incredible amount of positive stories to tell for the employees of Innovation Norway as they come here. And obviously in our region, with the high focus on high tech, there's a significant amount of conversation going on around the startup environment in Norway, which is very, very fast and very aggressive. There's a lot of startups happening in the Nordic region as a whole, and Norway also in particular. So the use of digital solutions is growing incredibly fast, and there are more startups in Norway than in most other countries as well. So these are important drivers for economic growth as you think about what's going to happen after the oil is no longer the key driver. And with that, I'm going to close. My contact information is here. The consulate, the Norwegian consulate, is in Everett. That's a good thing for some people and a bad thing for other people. But what I will share with you is that everybody that comes and visit me in Everett at the consulate, they are so glad that they can park for free. They're so glad they're not stuck in traffic in Seattle. And we did a little bit of research before we decided to open the office in Everett versus somewhere else. And the vast majority of the people that interact with us are actually residents of areas north of Seattle. So it's worked out pretty well. If you want to come by and say hi, give me a shout. We'll meet up there. It's not the biggest office in the world, but I welcome any one of you to come up and say hi. And it's an honor to be your consul, and I'm very grateful to have an opportunity to talk to you here today. So with that, I am finished, and I'll hand it back over to you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Viggo. That was fantastic to hear from you, and what a terrific update on everything that's happening in Norway and at the consulate. If you have YouTube open, you are able to put some questions in the chat if there are some questions of Viggo. I know we haven't had a robust questions in the chat in the past, but let's go to your chat if you have a moment and send any questions into Viggo.
And Eric, just so you know, I did not go onto YouTube, so if you wouldn't mind if there are
Yes.
questions, just paraphrase them back.
I will be happy to do so. No problem, Viggo. We'll give it a moment here to see if.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any questions coming in, but I know we'll have a chance to welcome you back again, Viggo, and maybe when we can all be together in person, and then there'll be some more. I know there always are some lively questions then, and so maybe people can save them up, or we can forward them to you if we get them. So
Absolutely, and like I said in the end, don't be shy. Reach out to me if you have any questions on anything. I am a resource for you here locally, and feel free to take advantage of it.
terrific. Well, as you know, we always have a Tusentalk troll as our speaker gift, and you probably have a few of these in your collection, but we'll be sending you another one to add to your collection. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Viggo, and even though it's virtually, and we look forward again to seeing you in person, and thank you for doing such a great job to represent all of us in your capacity as consul for Norway. Thank you.
It's my honor, and thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you. All right, and then I'll turn it back over to President Debbie.
Thank you again, Viggo. That was really great information. So now it's that part of the evening where we are going to spin our drum, and I have my assistant Corey here, as you can see. So we are going to draw 3 names.
All right, here we go. Let's see.
Anna Lisa Berger. We know her well. Penny Woodward. Victoria Sangre Hunter. So these are people that have been around regularly, and right now I'm going to give you the phone number again. I have a feeling we might hear from someone. 425-802-0679. I'm allowing Corey to get over to his phone. So we're going to give it a few moments here, but we can take these, of course. These phone calls can come offline.
Anytime, yeah.
Anytime. Just maybe check your
watching,
time. If it's the middle of the
Yeah.
night,
It may be
Corey
at 2 in the
might not
morning.
like that. But so we look forward to hearing from you. It'll be a $40 award. And we just want to thank you all for joining us again, and keep looking for that information. We're going to hope to put together a social hour. So we will let you know when and how that's going to be happening. And just have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. Good night. Oh, look at that. Hey, it's Corey. Oh.
Thanks, you guys.